Welcome back to another edition of Tennis Picks and Bets. I'm your host, John, here on the Mayo Media Network for all tennis coverage throughout the next 2 weeks at the Australian Open. We're getting into the second round as it will kick off on day 3 from Melbourne at the Australian Open. Before we get to those picks, though, make sure to like this video and click subscribe to the Mayo Media Network on YouTube. And then, of course, head on over to your favorite podcast app and rate, review, and subscribe to Daily Fantasy Sports Picks and Bets, The Mix. All right, into day 3 we go. We'll begin on the men's side with 2 picks and then head on over to the women's draw. First up, Carlos Alcaraz, -7 games against Dusan Lajovic at +105. A little bit of plus money here. I like it more than the -6.5 at -125. I think if you're going to play an elevated game spread, try and get the best price out of it you can, especially if you're moving from, a play that would result in a win onto a push. You're not really, selling off onto a hook where you could end up losing the play if it lands on 7. I like the value here a bit more. Again, if you're going to lay games at this extent, take the better price. Like, don't be buying a half game down to 6.5. My philosophy anyway. But I do think that this game spread should be around 8.5, potentially 8. Carlos Alcaraz leagues ahead of Dusan Lajovic on a hard court. Now, they're not too far apart in the rankings, but they are far apart in terms of talent on a hard court. Carlos Alcaraz, emerging a young prodigy out of Spain for years now, has really put together his game. It was always there on clay. It's really come a long way on hard courts. He can penetrate through the courts. His game will play up on the faster courts in Australia. He does have a bit of power. He's not overwhelming, but he's also not, a pure defensive, push-oriented player. And we also have a guy who is a freak athlete with some of the best court coverage and speed you're going to find on the men's tour. Plus, the youth also helps out against Lajovic, who actually played really well, almost unsustainably well in certain spots against Marton Fucsovics. Some of those winners where he was painting lines will not be winners against Alcaraz. Some of them where he had Fucsovics outstretched, returning defensively, and then finding winners on easier balls later in the point. Again, we'll come back with more pace and depth from Alcaraz. I think he's going to have a tougher time finding winners against the young Spaniard. And of course, the young Spaniard, great returner, should work his way into plenty of Lajovic service games, meaning when you're looking at a -7 game spread, you're looking for potentially a straight sets win, and you're looking for 1 or 2 sets where you can get a 6-1 or 6-2 set to really cover the bulk of those 7 games. And I think Alcaraz has all the tools to be able to do that in the second round. So we're going to go ahead and back him there. Next up, I want to play another small underdog money line, as we did on the first day with Radu Albot. Another scenario where I think this is a bit off. Pick him at worst. Maybe even have this guy as a slight favorite. It's Pedro Martinez Portero on the money line at +120 against Cristian Garin. Look, 2 guys, both of them are good on clay. I think neither is as good on hard as potentially a lot of the guys in this draw, but I think Pedro Martinez has a game much more suited to hard courts than Garin, less spin-oriented, if you will. I think he doesn't lose nearly as much power leaving clay onto the hard courts as Garin does. And both these guys played players who have zero history of success on hard courts in the first round. Pedro Martinez struggled early on, needed a long tie break in the first set, and then lost the second to Federico Del Bonis before pulling away, whereas Garin was the opposite. He played well early on against Facundo Bagnis, another clay court specialist from Argentina, but he then dropped the next 2 sets, needed 5 to win that one. I think on clay at smaller tournaments, Cristian Garin is as good as his ranking indicates, but when you get him into bigger tournaments and off of the clay court surface, I'm just not sold on him being someone who should be a favorite in this particular matchup. So I'm taking Martinez Portero on the money line at +120. Finally, we head on over to the women's side of the draw. We're going to back Nuria Parizas Diaz on the money line at -115 against Marina Zanevska. Look, big props to Zanevska for her breakout campaign last year, but we take a look at Parizas Diaz. The Spaniard also had a nice breakout campaign a year ago. Parizas Diaz's game translates more to the hard courts for me than Zanevska's. I'm not impressed with Zanevska's opening round win. Kaya Juvan has been struggling since being hurt last year. She's really had ups and downs. She's had some very good wins. She's had some pretty disappointing losses. That was a 2 tiebreak win for Zanevska in the first round. Nuria Parizas Diaz, of course, was supposed to play Ons Jabeur, one of the better players on tour. Ended up getting a lucky loser instead as Jabeur pulled out. So that win, not necessarily a good one, and not a lot to take away from it for Parizas Diaz. But again, bigger game. I think the serve plays up. Zanevska's will as well, but I think Parizas Diaz should be a bit more of a sizable favorite in this matchup against Zanevska, whose primary success has still come on clay. She won 1 ITF last year, and her only notable win was against Nina Stojanovic, and even that was via retirement. Of course, after the first set, Stojanovic retired, and so we're not sure exactly how impressive that win is, considering her opponent was injured. So a little bit of to take that match with a grain of salt. And I think we do have Paris STS in a nice spot here at a fairly cheap price to back on the money line. We'll be back for day 4 picks. And until then, enjoy the tennis from down under, and may you find plenty of winners.